So today I am happy to have with me Jose Madrigal, the city manager of Durango, Colorado, the county seat of La Plata County. And just as a little bit of background, Durango is the southwestern part of Colorado. Population is about 19,000, and it's the biggest urban area in a very rural county. In fact, Jose has told me that the biggest city, the nearest biggest city is Albuquerque, New Mexico. So that gives you a sense of where it is. And so welcome, Jose. I am really glad to have you here. And just to get started, would you just give us a little bit of background about your experience as a city manager and in this sort of city management area?
Absolutely. Thank you. I've been in city management for almost 20 years. It probably actually, well, now it might actually be a little over 20 years. Most of my experience before coming to Durango was in the state of Texas. I was served in assistant city manager roles in the Austin area at a city called Cedar Park. I went into the Dallas-Fort Worth area and did the same at an assistant city manager level position in Irving and also in the city of McKinney. And then I started my career as an intern at the very beginning at the city of Lubbock. So a lot of different areas, a lot of different parts from West Texas to Central Texas to Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and cities from 40,000 all the way to 250,000.
Yeah, well, so you came into kind of an unusual situation when you took the job in Durango. And so explain just a little about what happened there and some of the weaknesses you found in the system that allowed a very internal kind of fraud to take place. And I think you've been there 2 years?
I've been Durango now just over 2 years. When I was applying for the position, they had mentioned that there was some fraud by the previous finance director that would need to be worked with as one of those challenges and opportunities that they place on the brochure. So I was a little bit aware of kind of what had incurred and what was going on. But when I took over the position, there was some definitely work that needed to be done to kind of begin to what I would call put the city back on track, as well as begin to restore some of the trust issues that we had within the organization. And there were a few things that we were able to accomplish when we figured that out. The number one thing I think to start off with is everyone asks, well, how did the fraud happen? And really what it was setting up a checking account or a business account under a different, under her father-in-law's name, and was periodically writing checks to that account that they were cashing, and totaled to about $700,000 over about a period of 5 to 6 years. So it was kind of a regular occurring portion of it. Finally, at some point, an employee kind of found out about it, caught on, and reported the fraud. And then from there on, it was investigated and went through. Most of that investigation had happened before I had gotten here. However, when I got here, it was kind of like, okay, so what are the things that we need to do to improve on this, to help it from never trying to occur again? And one of the biggest things that we really did was the separation of IT and finance. So when we looked at how was this able to occur, the previous finance director had IT, had reported through the finance director. IT did not have its own director, but a manager. She had enabled herself to have full total control of the financial system. As well as giving permissions and approvals to that financial system was all directed under her. So she was the one-stop control all of everything financial in our financial system. So the first part that we did was I separated duties. So IT became its own department. We included an IT director on that portion. So IT no longer reported through the finance director. Then we also had the 2-level appropriation or verification. So while the finance director has some of that when it looks at approvals and who can get approvals in the financial system, it also has to be checked off by the IT department. The IT director, or in this case, we also hired a business analyst position that's full-time job in IT is to secure and maintain our enterprise, our financial software. So we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week person who's committed to doing so. So it takes 2 people to give any types of permissions or controls. And then as well as it takes two people to do any types of overrides or any type of check issuance. So it's not just one person that controlled our entire financial system. So that was one of the biggest things right away that we took care of, was really splitting out that IT and finance portion to have a checks and balances in two separate ways to control the financial system.
So can you talk a little bit about the things that you did there to deal with the internal kind of fraud that you were, that had occurred before you got there, and how that might also help you with a different kind of fraud that may occur outside of government about the money that comes in from the, federal grants?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we look at fraud, one of the first things also that we did was really an internal 24-hour fraud prevention hotline that we established. So it remains completely anonymous. We really did a good job of taking that out to the workforce and posting it and letting them know that if they see anything, they have an ability to report that. 24 hours anonymously, doesn't go through the city. We have a third-party contractor that manages it. So being able to make sure that next time when fraud occurs, that there's an ability for employees to have that outlet, an ability for employees to be able to, if they see something, say something, speak up something. And we really made sure that we didn't say that, well, financial fraud was the beginning of it, but that's not the only reason you can call this number or send in an email. If you see anything unethical behavior or fraud in general of what you think might be something there, you can go ahead and now have a way that you're able to bring that out and let that know and go to a third party where they get to vet it first. And then if it is determined that it is a fraudulent or something that needs to take a look at, they reroute it to the appropriate person within the organization. And that goes for even myself and the city attorney, both of us being council appointees. If somebody had a concern about our behavior or our possibility of fraud, they can report it and it would go straight to the council. So we really make it to a point to where there is no real big, or there shouldn't be a field of retaliation, that there's a way to find out where it can be reported. So that was the first part. And especially as you're getting in government funds, right? As you're starting to get more ARPA funding, things like that, it's important that, one pair of eyes, two pairs of eyes, three pairs of eyes. I mean, that it's good, but if you can have our 400 employees, full-time employees, pairs of eyes on it, that's even better. And knowing where they can go and how they can go about it in reporting fraudulent activity is a big component of it.
And what have you turned up from having that hotline? Have you been able to spot things that have maybe seem a little bit suspicious or something that you want to look into?
Right now we have not. To be honest, we haven't found anything through that hotline that has come out of fraudulent activity. But I always say that if you believe there's no fraud going on in your organization, then there's a lot of fraud going on in your organization. So it's always something that's got to be a continuous checking and going through. So it hasn't pulled up, but we have gotten claims that have come through the hotline of people who thought that fraudulent behavior was happening. When we've looked into them, it actually isn't. It's usually, and it's like, I would say a good thing. I'm going to knock on wood, but 90% of the time it's just a misunderstanding of what happened, but you get to go through the process and figure it out, which is good for everyone. There's an answer that's given. We get to make sure that we take a look into it, but in the end, that hotline has not proven any other fraudulent activity that has occurred.
You said before that this was a hotline geared to the workforce. What about to outside of the workforce? What about to the residents of Durango?
They have the ability to go into it as well. So it is public and private. We do put that out on our city website and letting them know if they see something to report it. And there's been a few that have come into it. Unfortunately, most of it tends to be more of a bad customer service than it really needs to be on anything else that comes through it, or a perception, I would say, of bad customer service. And but it's open to everyone, public and internally.
I know I've talked with you in the past about the importance of when you got to Durango, getting technology working better and more effectively than it had been in the past. Can you talk a little bit more about how technology itself can help protect against fraud, maybe the transparency involved in being able to really show what's going on?
Absolutely. I think one of the things when we first started, or when I came in here, we had talked a little bit in regards to what was that our budgeting lack of software. I would say the budget was done on Microsoft Word tables, so there were errors that were being found, and so we had transitioned when I first got here to Excel, but when I came in, it was September of 2020, and budget was already in the throes of the process. We have a full calendar year for ourselves on this one. So we had to go right on into and get in a budget. So we did Excel spreadsheet. However, we then have turned it around to a OpenGov budgeting software that we were able to utilize and get to get displayed or get what I would call deployed within 9 months since I've been here, and my first 9 months. And I think that's been a really big opportunity that helped internally, but also helped externally, where we could see in real time as months are closing where our financials are at as compared to budget. So always having that information out there that people are checking and looking on, and then also understanding that it has the background to it. So if you see checks that are going, payments that are going, you get to see what the use is for and what the vendor is that was being paid for. So it also has a little bit of a section on that, where if you see something in your department, and it may not be something that's in your area, but you're looking at your budget and something seems a little off or a little not on the up and up, you're able to see real live time. Who is it? What's that payment? Who is that consultant? Or who is that contractor or the vendor? And determine if it, was something that was legitimately purchased or not.
Do you feel like the experience of Durango and the embezzlement that did occur has made the council, has made the city itself and your staff more careful, more attentive than maybe they might have been before?
Oh, absolutely. I think that anytime you have that, it lingers with you throughout your organization. I mean, even to this day, you still have people who bring it up, especially as we look at our ACFR that we just completed this year again for 2021. Yeah, we're always a year behind on the 2021 financials, but you go through it, and it's always something that sometimes in other communities that I've been into, maybe not, but it was more of a formality of like, okay, that's great, and going through. But being in this organization, even after a couple of years since the fraud, it does kind of tend up when that item comes on the agenda and people are looking at it and wanting to know more about it, and seeing if anything's off or any kind of discrepancies. So that's there because of what happened in the financial embezzlement before. So it definitely does put up a little bit more of an intensity on some of the items, and it's still here.
When you think of federal funds coming into the city, are there any buckets that are particularly worrisome to you, or do you see, vulnerabilities that you're thinking about?
I think there's always vulnerabilities. One of the, I guess, what I would call the advantages of it is we've actually used the majority of the funding. We received about 4.8 million it's this year and next year in our federal funds. And we stood up a program. One of them is a department, our housing innovation department. So that's where a lot of it went into, because affordable housing is a really big challenge here in Durango. So, it's not something where people are able to kind of do these one-off purchases, right? It's setting up salaries, it's setting up a department, and you're able to put that through OpenGov and kind of see how that's performing. We've also done a study on La Posta Road, which is a big road that we're looking to do a design that could really open up some more affordable housing as well as economic development opportunities. So that was about 600,000. So taking big chunks out of it like that really deploy in programs that are really highly defined, that also are all very, very much on the public radar in regards to wanting to see success in those. So it already naturally has a lot of updates and eyes on it of what are we getting out of that money? How is it working? I do see, though, that part of that also is some technology purchases that we've purchased to try to help us in our transparency and our engagement, a little bit smaller purchases for computer equipment and tablets and things that are in that nature. And I think those are the ones that kind of really get you if there was a part of like, ooh, one might be more susceptible to fraud. I think that's it. Because it's, purchasing equipment, purchasing, computers, and maybe you buy $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000 worth of computers. Sometimes those are easy things to just kind of gloss over, like, oh, it's a computer, and move on. and not really making sure that it was a computer, that we did procure it, that we did bring it in. So I think there are some areas like that for some quick wins when people think it's a quick win in technology, that if you're not really keeping an eye on it, it may, fly underneath the radar.
You kind of to close up here, do you have any advice to other smallish cities in rural areas? Just things that you might be thinking about, might have faced that could help other people, other managers?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm a little blessed. I think, and when I say it, because while my population is about 19,000. We have 400 full-time employees and our budget's 171 million total. So we are a little bit more sophisticated. And so with that understanding, I know I do have more resources than your typical 19,000 city would have. We've beefed up our accounting staff and our financial staff. So sometimes for somebody who is a 19,000 city that doesn't have all of that, some of these things, may not ring true, or it can look and say like, well, you had some resources in which you're able to provide. But I think one of the couple things that I would leave as, things that I would be careful of is, the part about a smaller organization, a small community that I realize is the connection. And connection can be a really great thing because you have that small town feel. Everybody knows each other. But the other side of that is everybody can be friendly. You get to know somebody, especially that I've noticed in this organization, in much different ways than I have ever had in my entire career in other organizations that were larger or even in metropolitan areas where, my kids go to school with a lot of my coworkers and their kids. They sometimes hang out, or we're very well connected in knowing. And sometimes with that personal connection comes a very much a letdown in your guard. Right. It's because now the person is personable. You just don't see them as, oh, they're the finance director. You see like, oh, that's my finance director. We'll call her Jill. Jill and my kids go together. I mean, they play soccer together. They play basketball together. And, Jill also has friends with Larry and Larry. And so you start building all of these social connections. And when people, you really have those human connections, it's sometimes easier. Your guard gets let down. You're like, they're just a good person. They'd never do that. And you'd never think that they would. And sometimes your guard can get let down, specifically being in a smaller community because of those connections, where you are personally connected, where in some areas you may not be personally connected, and it's easier to kind of be a little more suspicious.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, is that, you want everybody to trust each other, both within government, and you want the residents to trust the government, but maybe not too much.
Absolutely. So, that's one of the biggest ones that I noticed of that is just the smaller community and the connections you build. They become personal. And when you do that, sometimes your guard's naturally going to let down because, they're people, they're people you hang out with. And that makes it a little bit tougher. The second thing that I would always take a look at is, modeling yourself after bigger cities and some of the best practices that they do, and looking at them and not using it as a barrier. Coming from a bigger city to a smaller city, I've worked with some smaller city managers, but I've come from a bigger side, and I've modeled sometimes our processes after bigger cities. And some people who have not been in a bigger city kind of already have this shield that's like, oh, nope, can't do that. They have way more resources than we'll ever have. So we just got to do it the way we do it because that's what we have. And I think that there's ways where you can scale a lot of those things that are down of like, okay, I may not have a 30-member accounting department, but I have 15, and I can be able to do some things in a better way of looking at it. I think sometimes the bravado of coming from a small town or representing a small town has that we can't do it like bigger towns. And there's a lot of processes that are out there that I think you can definitely scale down. So not to be intimidated by the processes of bigger areas and looking at them and saying, what can I bring in? Now, that doesn't say that bigger cities do it better, because coming on both, I can absolutely say that they don't. And there's things that come from being in a smaller community, but I think there's times that we can learn from that. But you can easily put up a mental block of, well, they don't even understand what it's like to be in a small city, so I can't even use them. And I'm like, no, you still can.
Yeah, I think that's really such an excellent point. But unfortunately, Jose, we're running out of time here.
No worries.
But this was really a great discussion. And thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to our Follow the Money series. And until next time, I'm Katherine Barrett, and have a great day, everyone.
Last month, at the 3rd Annual Future Cities Summit, Raw 50 convened leaders from across the nation to explore the biggest issues and opportunities facing city governments today. If you missed the event or want to rewatch a session, visit rffuturecities.com and navigate to the On Demand tab to view any session from the event.